So while there's been further escalation in the war between Israel and Iran tonight, no clear off-ramp appears clear, as we've been saying, in the absence of talks between the two nations.
Iran also cancelled a sixth round of nuclear talks with the United States on Sunday in Oman, arguing that talks were meaningless after accusing Washington of allowing Israel to attack Iran.
President Donald Trump, who is currently in Canada for the G7 summit, was asked if he'd heard any messages from intermediaries that Iran wanted to de-escalate.
They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Now, for more on this, we speak to US Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York. Sherwin, a very good evening to you again. President Trump has been on social media and now the G7 talking about Iran wanting to talk, but the Iranians have also said on the record that they no longer trust the US's role as a mediator, given their backing of Israel's attack on the Islamic State. What more do we know at this stage?
Well, the breaking news, Bongi, we're out of the G7 summit. We are getting reports now that President Trump will not sign onto a G7 statement that asserts Israel's right to self-defense and opposes Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon, but also critically calls for de-escalation. And the news narrative is pointing to that last part of the statement, the call for de-escalation that President Trump is not willing to sign onto at this time. Certainly not along with the other 6 leaders gathered around that G7, or including the EU. So it's actually 8 leaders, including the United States, but 7 seeking consensus on this statement. And of course, over the weekend, Bongi, where he has been on social media saying that Iran and Israel should make a deal and will make a deal, just like he managed to get a deal between India and Pakistan most recently. We will have peace soon between Israel and Iran. Many calls for a meeting to take place. I do a lot and I don't get enough credit, he said over the weekend. And then earlier, in an earlier post on Truth Social, he talked about how the US had nothing to do with the attack in Iran, and that if we were attacked in any way, shape or form by Iran, the full strength and might of the US armed forces will come down on you at levels never before seen. But then understand the Iranian perspective, right? They were engaged with Washington in talks with the United States over its nuclear program. And a 6th round of talks was due to be held in Oman, in Muscat, Oman, on Sunday over the past weekend. And of course, those Israeli strikes late Friday here in the United States, early hours of Saturday morning, scuppering that dialogue. So when the United States says, we want to get a deal, we want talks, the Iranian argument is, well, we were doing that with you, right? The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson over the weekend saying that the other side acted in a way that makes dialogue meaningless. They believe that the United States green-lighted the attacks by Israel on Iran, and so no longer sees the United States as an honest broker in the nuclear talks that they were engaged on. So this is now a very difficult situation, a complex situation, as the strikes and ballistic missiles continue in the Middle East between Israel and Iran. And
right on that point, Sherwin, I mean, once it's here in studio and this hits close to home, we've been showing visuals of an Israeli strike on an Iranian state television in Tehran. Let's just watch the clip and then we'll discuss right after.
ملاحظه کردید صدایی که شنیدید فضای غبارآلود استادیوم
Scary stuff, I tell you. Israel's defense showing the defense minister saying that in a statement after those strikes that the propaganda and incitement broadcasting authority of the Iran regime was attacked by Israeli forces. Any reaction to the targeting of media in this fashion?
Yeah, it was a question put to the Secretary General spokesperson at the United Nations, Farhan Haq, a short time ago, and the response is that we reiterate, this is from the UN spokesperson, we reiterate our concern about any attacks on journalists going about their work by any side. But there's also context, right? The most recent war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, as you well know, media workers and journalists have been a prime target of the Israeli Defense Force. 76 media workers and journalists have been killed in Gaza. So there is a history of Israel targeting areas where journalists are working, whether intentionally or not. But the result has been scores of media workers that have been killed. And we understand that there were also casualties at the Iranian state broadcaster in Tehran during that strike. So clearly targeting the media here, whether it's state TV or not, the Israeli military certainly targeting those areas as well. We had a clip earlier also, Bongi, where from the Israeli ambassador Danny Danon, who spoke a short time ago at the Security Council stakeout here at the United Nations. He was complaining about the fact that Iranian ballistic missiles were targeting civilian areas in Israel. And of course, the pushbacks from some journalists was that, hundreds of civilians have been killed from Israeli strikes in Iran. I think we've got the clip. Can we play that?
Israel uncovered clear evidence that the Iranian regime was planning a surprise attack in coordination with their proxies. They had planned to invade from all sides, with thousands of terrorists and thousands of projectiles. As you know, October 7 was a deeply painful and traumatic day for all of us. But the danger we confronted last night was of a different magnitude. A surprise attack with a nuclear strike, which Iran was preparing for, would have been terminal. Israel could not and would not wait for that moment to arrive. The decision to act last night was not made lightly. It followed repeated violations by the Iranian regime, continued deception, and an absence of meaningful international consequences. Meanwhile, the Secretary General has made last night a statement expressing concern over our operation. But I must ask, where was the Secretary General when Iran spent years arming itself while vowing to wipe Israel off the map? Where was his voice when Iran rained hundreds of missiles and drones on our civilians? His silence in the face of Iran's constant aggression has been deafening. We acted to protect our citizens. We acted to prevent a threat that would endanger not only Israel, but the entire world. We will not sit quietly while our people are targeted. Not again, not ever.
Bongi, that was a clip from Danny Danon, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, speaking here on Friday. I had another clip that I wanted us to play, but I'll just read you what he said a short time ago. He was asked if there was a possibility of an off-ramp for direct talks with the Iranians. He said that we would need to see actions from the Iranian regime. You know, just to say it's not enough, because we saw in the last decades that they're the masters of deception. They know how to play the game to buy time. So if they really mean it and they're willing to give up this machine of terror and destruction, referring to their nuclear program, that there would then be place for dialogue. But certainly in the absence of some sort of mediator here, the United States, of course, are not really seen by the Iranians as a fair interlocutor here. The question is, who will step in here to get these sides to talk? You now see President Trump refusing to sign on to a call for de-escalation. I can also tell you that Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, is now heading to the G7 in Canada. What role can he play? He called on social media over the weekend. He said Israeli bombardments of Iranian nuclear sites, Iranian missiles striking Tel Aviv. Enough escalation. Time to stop. Peace and diplomacy must prevail. The question is when, the question is how, and we don't have that answer yet.
And we certainly don't, Sherwin, and we'll stay with this particular issue and speak to Tembisa just a little later on. But Sherwin, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed with the developments there. That's Sherwin Bryce-Pease live for us in New York.